All right, this is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hi there. How are you this Tuesday, February 4th? Having the best day ever? Well, today I'm actually going to try to put in place something that I've been promising to do for a while now, and that is give you a little more time to talk in this first hour where we listen to your calls and take your texts. There's been a lot going on. There is going to be a fire hose of stuff for these first months of the Trump administration, and I do want you to be part of the conversation. It's just sometimes, as you know, I get a little wrapped up, and I forget to take calls. So, opening up the text lines and the phone lines, 773-763-9278, 763-763-9278. Yes, of course, we are going to talk about the news of the day. Without question, we are going to talk about the news of the day. But I want to invite you to join the conversation. Love to have you call in if that's something that you're comfortable with. Love to have you shoot me a text if talking on the radio is something that you need to work up to. I will be checking the text line. Paul Shavari is going to be screening the phone calls that come in. So, because yesterday, I'm sorry, I know there were a number of you who were waiting on the phone lines to talk, and I ran out of time because I yammered too much, as I seem to be doing right now. One thing before we get into the politics, you know, I've been telling you about this guy I know he's on Instagram. His name is Zachary Rubin. He is, of all things, an allergy doctor. But as soon as, you know, Donald Trump has been taking down all the government websites, every place people go to find out information about, you know, especially medical information, the schedule of vaccines, what vaccines you should get when, that's gone. There was a website that explained a woman's reproductive rights. That's gone. Even though we, the taxpayers, pay for that, apparently Donald Trump doesn't think we should have access to it. This is the fascist playbook. Cut off our pipelines to good, reliable information, and then when the government says something, well, we really don't know if they're lying to us or not. If we don't have other sources of information to double check what's going on, the concept is that we will then be more likely to believe Donald Trump and his minions when they tell us something. And this is going to be really important because it looks like Bobby Kennedy Jr. is on his way to being head of Health and Human Services, and God only knows what kind of dreck we're going to get in place of good information under him. He is not a reliable source of good information. And, you know, of course, you know, he's telling the senators whatever they want to hear. One senator said, well, you know, he assured me that he was going to follow all the guidelines. You know what? Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett assured us that they were going to follow precedent. Did they? Oh, no, they did not. That's how we got the Dobbs decision striking down Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was the law of the land for 50 years. Oh, of course, we precedent is everything. Of course we will follow precedent. We respect precedent. Oops. No, we don't. Oh, I'm really sorry. We don't. Republicans particularly these days have learned that when they are in confirmation hearings of any kind, first of all, stall. Remember how Brett Kavanaugh would pause before his answers, and then he might say, well, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. It was a way of running out the clock. Oh, could you say that again? Pause, pause, pause. There are lots of tricks for getting through Senate confirmation hearings. So, long story short, reliable information is disappearing, and God loves Zachary Rubin, who's, like I said, he's an allergist. And he took to Instagram and he said, you know what? All of the reliable government sources of information, the CDC puts out bulletins. They want doctors to know about, hey, here's an idea. Let them know about recalls. I'm sorry, this drug was found to be contaminated. Yeah, we're recalling it. That's gone. Oh, my gosh, you should probably keep your eyes open because there's an outbreak of tuberculosis in Kansas, which there is. Those kinds of warnings are gone. So Zachary said, I've got access to good information. You know, I'm not saying I'm the CDC, but I will try to bring you as much information as I can about various recalls. He said some of the stuff is designed just for doctors, but he said some of it is just for the public. One of the things we've mentioned, not this week or last week, but we've talked about bird flu. And one of the reasons why having a reasonable, sane head of Health and Human Services is so important is because there's a lot of fear right now. If you follow any virologists on social media, they are terrified. Not only is bird flu decimating the bird population, it has now jumped over to cows, and there are a number of dairy cows that have had to be put down. We have had instances of bird flu jumping to human beings. Right now, it is extremely rare. But you know how the COVID virus keeps changing? Well, the fear is that there will be a human who gets infected with bird flu, and inside that person's body, the virus will adapt. It will adapt because it's like, hey, here's a new host. Yum, yum. Haven't been in a person before. This is good. You know what? I bet if I just changed this part of my little virus composition, I could get to more people faster. That's the fear, that a human being will get bird flu because human beings are already getting it, but rarely, but that a human being will get it and it will mutate into a form that is much more easily transmissible from person to person. And COVID has a death rate of about 1%. So far, bird flu has a death rate of about 50%. Can you only imagine how that will, if it becomes adapted to people, how that will tear through our population? It's going to make COVID look like a tiny bump in the road. And bird flu is going to be a solid brick wall. And guess what? It's been found in the Chicago area. This isn't just a them over there problem anymore. It's an us right here problem. And one of the recent postings that Dr. Rubin put up on Instagram, again, he's Rubin_allergy, Rubin, R-U-B-I-N, Rubin_allergy. And bird flu, which is also H1N1, has been found in the Chicago area. It has been diagnosed at the Lincoln Park Zoo. Zachary Rubin did a post about this, and since this is a really important topic, and it is now here among us, I wanted to share with you what he had to say about bird flu. Listen to this.
Hundreds of ducks have been found sick or passed away along the shores of Lake Michigan in the Chicago area this past weekend. H5N1 bird flu has been reported on a few occasions since December in the Chicagoland area, including at Lincoln Park Zoo. There was a flamingo and a seal that unfortunately passed away in early January, but no other cases have been reported at this time at the zoo. This is a reminder that if you see any deceased animals in public, do not get near it. You need to call either animal control or public health department that's near you to report it so that they can help safely remove those animals. Also, influenza A cases have been rapidly spreading across the country. If you have not gotten your flu vaccine yet, please do that as soon as possible to help reduce the chances of you not only getting sick, but severely sick, because many people are getting very sick right now. If you want any further updates regarding your health, you can feel free to follow on this platform or get more detailed information at my Substack newsletter, which you can subscribe to for free.
That was Dr. Zachary Rubin. You can find him on Instagram at Rubin_allergy. And he posts about recalls. He posts about illnesses. He was one of the first people to talk about the tuberculosis outbreak in Kansas. Also, I did not find a good place to add this to our programming a couple weeks ago, but one of the vets, Dr. Emily Swiniarski at Anti-Cruelty, posted a video. If you follow Anti-Cruelty, you should be able to find it, about bird flu. Bird flu poses a risk to cats. There's a short video from Dr. Emily Swiniarski from Anti-Cruelty, but the bottom line is, please, if you're a family that likes to let your cat go outside, trust me, I had a cat that thought, he needed to be outside all the time. I decided he was going to be an indoor cat, and he adapted very quickly. The best thing you can do for your cat is keep them indoors, because they can get bird flu. Also, if you see one of the things that she warns about is if you're taking a walk and you see a dead bird on the sidewalk, sometimes the instinct is to just pick it up and throw it in a trash can or something. Don't do that unless you have disposable gloves, or you can pick it up in a wad of paper towels. If you see especially a dead bird, but really any dead animal in your neighborhood, and you don't want to leave the corpse there, you want to dispose of it, do it in such a way that you do not come into contact with that animal. Okay, that is your public service portion of the show. Now we are going to return to the political portions of this broadcast. And we are going to go to the phone lines. Mike is on the line from Mount Prospect. Hi, Mike.
Greetings, Joan. Appreciate you so much. Elon Musk's kind of a dead bird in my way of thinking.
Yeah.
The personality of one.
Yeah.
But anyway, I wanted to let you know that calling my senator's offices, Durbin and Duckworth, doesn't really get me anything done, because the lines are either busy, they're not answering the phone, or their voicemails are full. But yet I could get right through to you, Joan. And so I'm encouraging people to go to their office, as we're doing tomorrow at noon. So
Yes.
We're going to be at Federal Plaza at noon tomorrow, and we're going to let them know we want them to obstruct these crazy people. We want them to block all their nominees, and let's play Mitch McConnell for a little while and see if we can mess them up a little bit. And I am not giving up, kiddo. This is our time to fight, and the last thing we're going to do is sit and lick our wounds. I did that for a couple weeks after the election, but this is the time to stand up.
That's absolutely right. And Mike is talking about at the Federal Plaza in downtown Chicago tomorrow at noon. Indivisible and some other groups are saying, come down here. Tammy Duckworth has an office there. Dick Durbin has an office there. And Indivisible is going to deliver a letter that basically says, we want you to oppose all of Donald Trump's nominees. We want you to deny no more unanimous consent. We're going to slow everything down in the Senate We're going to use every procedural tactic there is, just like Mitch McConnell used to do when there was something he didn't like. We're going to slow it down. Anytime they try to have a cloture vote, which means basically we're not going to talk anymore, we're just going to vote, Democrats should vote no on that. No, we need to talk about this some more. And force quorum calls at every do everything in the procedural playbook to slow it down, to make things difficult for Donald Trump. You know, all the senators, they were so enamored of Marco Rubio. Oh, yes, that's, he was swept in to be the head of state. And what is he doing? He's doing Trump's bidding. When they're trying to lock out all the 10,000 employees at USAID, and Marco Rubio made an announcement yesterday. Well, actually, I've decided I'm the head of USAID, and Marco Rubio is rubber stamping everything that President Musk and President Trump want done right now. So what was that all about? What was that love fest about? Did Tammy Duckworth think that because, Marco Rubio, you were one of the first people to say, I'll change the rules so you can bring your baby to the Senate chambers, so I'm for you, guy.
No.
Give me a break.
No, I'm with you, Joan, and I like when you're angry. You're the best. And we got to stand up to these guys. And the guys that are the bootlickers to the billionaires, those guys are just looking for their pocketbooks, and they don't care about our freedom. They don't care about us. They just care about their money and staying in control.
Yes.
But, hey, there's more of us than there are of them. And we're coming for them, and we're not going to get mad, Joan. We're going to get even.
That sounds like a plan, Mike. And if any of you within the sound of our voices have been trying to call Duckworth's office or Durbin's office and can't get through, sign up. If you're not already getting the daily email, Indivisible Chicago puts out a daily email called Indivisible Chicago Daily Action. And if you scroll down to the middle of it, it says if you can't get through, if you can't go to the office yourself and you can't get through on the phone, there's a link in that email where you can send them your own email directly into the Senate offices. So make sure that you are heard. And if you can show up at noon tomorrow at the Federal Plaza, do it. And say hello to Mike when you're there.
Up.
Yeah.
We'll see you there. Thanks,
okay.
Joan. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Let's go to the phone lines where Jackie is. Jackie, you're also in Mount Prospect. Hey, big day for Mount Prospect on this show.
Joan, thank you for all your work. I would like to talk a little bit about responding to Elon Musk getting these federal codes, which is so dangerous I can't even put words on it.
Elon Musk, by the way, kids, now has access to all of the data that the Treasury Department has. So Elon Musk has your Social Security number, has access to your tax returns, knows where you work, knows how much you make, knows all kinds of really interesting stuff about you. Right now, it's gone. I mean, he's got that information.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but I strongly suspect that Elon's going to take that information and figure out how he can use it to make more money. Oh.
Well, that he'll figure out. But Jamie Raskin last night was talking on MSNBC, and I think made a good point that it's not maybe going to be wise to organize big protests because of the threat to use the military against people and so on. I've been thinking about, how can we sit at home and resist? Because they can't find all us little ants at home. And these billionaires, what they understand is losing money. And what I would like to propose, I don't know how to put this in the pipeline, but is that we do targeted boycotts. Even if we can't do them for a long time, or we're worried about, we don't want to crash the workers, in the past they've done like a one-day don't buy from Amazon or a one-day,
Well, you know what?
Don't trade with this.
I've completely stopped buying from Amazon. Here's what I do, because, sometimes you think, well, I want this really weird doohickey. I don't know who sells this really weird doohickey. So you go to Amazon because, if you type in the search bar weird doohickey, a bunch of things are going to pop up. What I do, I use Amazon like a search engine, and then I'll see who sells what I want. I close Amazon, and I go directly to the website for that company, and I buy direct from them. Amazon may make some money because I click, but they're not going to make the commission that they usually get on sales. So that's what I do. And frankly, I try to use just a regular search bar to see if I can come up with names of company. If you see something, if you're not crazy about what Mark Zuckerberg's doing, if you see an ad on Instagram for something you think you might be interested in, don't click shop now on Instagram. We don't need to put more money in Mark Zuckerberg's pocket. Open up a window, open up a new tab on your computer, and either Google that item or look to see what company bought the ad and go to that company's website directly. Cut out the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Jeff Bezoses of the world.
I know that people feel like they can't live without social media, but I would like to see, and I myself am not on social media, but I would like to see people shut down your X account, shut down your Facebook account, and let it be known why you're doing it.
Well, my partner, Ray, is a lot... he's a lot braver than I am. I deleted my X account. I no longer am on that platform. I still have Instagram because I like to look at dogs, and there's lots of dog accounts on Instagram. That's all I do with Instagram is dogs. But he's on Blue Sky, and that's it. He's shut off his Facebook. He's shut off Instagram. He's shut off Threads. He gave up X a long time ago, and I have to hand it to him. I can't quite. I've quit X. I can't quite bring myself to quit the rest of them yet. I'm still in a. We're going to see. Threads I don't have much use for, but like I say, I have got all those great dogs on Instagram, and those dogs need me, and I need those dogs.
Well, yeah, I think, I'm talking in general. I mean, I don't know what the best specific strategies are. There are some of us who have, maybe health stuff going on or whatever that we can't go walking around in the stores, and so maybe we do Amazon or something like that because we have to have something brought to us. But my point is we need to organize. We need to find out how to hit these billionaires in the pocket.
Yes.
And how to disengage because we cannot be punished for disengaging.
Right.
They can kill us for going to the street.
I think what you've done is excellent. And, that's why I've said I had let my Costco membership lapse, and I recently re-upped it because Costco refuses to back down on DEI. And ELF Cosmetics, ELF, they're really reasonably priced cosmetics. They have also taken a stand for DEI. So, I'm looking for the companies that are doing, following along with my ideals. And I think that's a brilliant idea, Jackie. And I encourage everybody to do what you're doing. I've got to get to a break. Thank you so much for the call. We are going to take this break and be back with more right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is Tuesday, and like every day, we spend the first hour talking to you, taking your calls, reading your texts. Before we get back to that, though, there's something I'd like to share with you. I actually, suggested that maybe I should have like your weekly soundbite from Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine Crockett is the congressperson from Texas, Democrat. Remember bleached blonde, butch body? When Marjorie Taylor Greene, they were in a hearing, and Marjorie Taylor Greene said to her that she probably couldn't read what was in front of her because of her false eyelashes were so long. And Jasmine fired back that she wasn't going to take advice from a bleached blonde, butch body, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yes, that's our Jasmine. I'm going to get back to the phone lines. I'm going to get back to the text lines. But first, Jasmine has a few words for those of you who voted for Donald Trump, maybe who know somebody who voted for Donald Trump, and maybe a sentiment that we could share with people who voted for Donald Trump and who are very quickly coming to realize that he lied to them. Oh, he lied to them. Oh, no. Listen to Jasmine Crockett.
Not our democracy. Well, he did say he'd be a dictator on day one. Oh, Democrats, it's just Trump. He just talks. Well, let me tell you something. He is doing more than talking. We talked about Project 2025. We talked about the consolidation of power. We talked about how he wanted to be a king. We talked about in a democratic republic, that is not what it is. We have some sort of checks and balances, and he is doing everything that he can to get rid of those checks and balances. The DOJ and the people that he's going after were simply doing their jobs. The problem is that Americans thought that it was okay to take a full-fledged criminal and make him the president of the United States, and then they want to act aghast when he does criminal things. Let me tell you, we have a thug in charge of the United States, and if we don't wake up, we may not have a United States, because right now he has only been successful in being a divider in chief.
Well said, Jasmine. And now there's just a real quick soundbite from a woman by the name of Adelis Farrow. She's a Venezuelan. Now, remember, you might have read that Trump was getting rid of TPS for Venezuelans. Documented immigrants from Venezuela have been under temporary protected status. Donald Trump has decided he's doing away with that. That means those documented immigrants who've done it right, are now subject to deportation. And there was an interview done by the NBC station down in South Florida where Venezuelans held a press conference. And you know the point of it? What? By the way, Miami-Dade County is 69% Hispanic. In the last election, Trump won Miami-Dade County by 10 points. 69% Hispanic population. Trump won it by 10 points. And now people are like, wait a minute. He said we were going to be safe. Wait a minute. He promised us on the campaign trail. He promised us. Listen to Adelis Farrow speaking in South Florida.
More than betrayed. Beyond betrayed. They used us. They actually, during the campaign, and I don't want to make this political, but during the campaign, the elected officials from the Republican Party, they actually told us that he was not going to touch the documented people.
He was not going to touch the documented people. And then he did. Are you shocked? Are you just pick your jaw up off the floor? The Republicans in South Florida made a promise that Trump broke. How many times do you think we're going to see this kind of thing? But he said he wouldn't. He said we were safe. Some 350,000, that might even be low, that figure, but it's a lot of Venezuelans are in this country They entered legally, doing the process that our government set out for them. They were given temporary protected status. These are documented, not undocumented. These Venezuelans didn't sneak across the border. And now the program that offered them that protection is gone. And they're betrayed. Gosh, Donald Trump lied to them. Now, if they had been better informed, if somebody had told them that Donald Trump had said other things and that Project 2025 had spelled out a pretty scary future, but the Republicans told them this wouldn't happen. They're beyond betrayed. And the rest of us, yeah. Let's go back to the phone lines. Dennis is on the line from Evanston. Hello, Dennis. How are you?
Hey, Joan, truth be told, I'm sick to my stomach. I just watching all of this going on and, as you know, watching illegal activities taking place and people standing around. And, you know, I know that this is not the country where people just, you know, pick up guns and run around and do whatever is not right. But from what's happening, there's got to be some sort of recourse. Things are being done that are illegal, and the Democrats are standing there going, you can't do that. And nothing is being done, and it's really scary. And I'm watching all of this. I tried calling the government offices today for Duckworth and Durbin, and the phone dropped. It just went busy and dropped. And we know that people are calling. We know that people are upset, but nothing is happening. I mean, nothing is happening. And Elon Musk is running around, putting his stuff into whatever his finger into whatever pie he wants, and nobody is stopping him. You know, this is not the way America was. We had a government that had checks and balances. There's no checks, there's no balances, and this is and there are people who like think that this is okay, and that's not the way it works. And not that the government is the best. It's not the worst, it's not the best, and there are things that can get better, but, I mean, you just don't shut down, you know, all different parts of our government. USAID, like one of those things, that was made by John F. Kennedy, and it was during the Cold War, and it was set up kind of in a way to kind of curry favor with countries that were developing and had the choice of going Marxist or going Democratic.
That's what people are talking about when what Dennis is describing is what is referred to as soft power. No, we're not going to send troops. We're not going to invade. But you know what? This is what China has been doing this in just the last few years in a big way in Africa. They don't go in and say, we're Chinese and you should think the way we think. They say, oh, it looks like you've got some bridges that need to be rebuilt. Here, let us share our information. As a matter of fact, we will bring over Chinese contractors and Chinese machines, and we will rebuild those bridges for you. And you think that a country gets enough of that and they don't start saying, hey, you know what? If there is a big fight between the USA and China, I think, guys, we better go with China because they're on our side. They're helping us.
Yeah. And you know, Africa is a mineral-rich country that could supply, I mean, the world with all kinds of stuff. And, you know, again, it's that whole
And you know what's
idea
interesting? So is Ukraine. At 3 o'clock, Joel Ostro is going to be here, but he sent me an article that was published by CNN. Ukraine has a lot of minerals, And remember that perfect phone call where Donald Trump said, I know we've got a bunch of aid here ready to go out to you. You know what? It would really do me a big favor if you would just say that you're investigating Joe Biden. You don't even have to do it. Just say it. And I'll make sure those funds get released the second that announcement is broadcast. That was why Donald Trump was impeached the first time around. And he is doing the same thing this time. The same thing. Yeah.
Nobody is holding his feet to the fire. Nobody is holding these other people feet to the fire. It's disgusting that, and you can't explain to people who are in that MAGA cult, like the rest of the world thinks we're crazy and they think we're nuts and they think that this is the biggest crock, and they're like, oh no, Donald Trump has got these guys bamboozled and he's got them scared. And I mean, they're scared because they don't know what the guy's going to do with his finger near a nuclear bomb. But I mean, that's the reason to be scared. But they think he's, that's crazy. And you can't convince any of these MAGA people that, this is illegal. And 30-day notice for
that's why the whole thing is going to get tied up in the courts. The whole thing. Even the FBI agents, you know how he wants to gut the FBI? The FBI agents have now gone to court as a group to say that these mass firings, this mass purge is illegal. That's everybody's, everything is going to end up in court. There's going to be 1,000 court cases fighting the Trump administration. If there aren't already, it's going to happen in a matter of days because that's, they don't care if something's legal. They don't care about that at all. They just figure, well, we'll try it. And even if it doesn't go through, then at least we can tell our base, hey, we tried. Told you we were going to get rid of the Department of Education is his next target. He wants to get rid of that one, too. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah. Thank you for the call, Dennis.
About every day, and I just kind of fall in, and I just needed to vent to somebody. So thank you.
Amen.
Have a great day.
Thank you. And for those of you who have been trying to call Tammy Duckworth and Dick Durbin, here's what I was able to find as far as emailing them. For Dick Durbin, durbin.senate.gov/contact/email. And that takes you to Dick Durbin's page to send an email to the office. Durbin.senate.gov. It's his website. And the part of the website, there's a button that says contact. You click on that and it says contact email. Durbin.senate.gov/contact/email. It's a little bit different for Tammy Duckworth. Again, go to her website and you can figure out how to send her an email. It is duckworth.senate.gov/connect/email-Tammy. Duckworth.senate.gov/connect/email-Tammy. No spaces. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We are taking your calls at 3 o'clock. We're going to talk to Joel Ostrow about how Donald Trump is trying to blackmail Ukraine right now, which should be no surprise to anybody. He did it before. Why wouldn't he do it again? I want several of you on the phone lines, and I'm looking at the text lines, people have been having trouble reaching their senators. There are lots of different sites. There's one site that I use, myreps.datamade.us. There's lots of aggregator sites where basically you put in your zip code, and it will tell you who are your federal representatives, your county representatives, your village representatives, your municipality representatives. It's sort of a one-stop shopping. If you don't know who your state rep or your state senator is, that's a good place to find out. But these days, there isn't a politician alive who doesn't have a website. So if you know, for instance, my state senator is Laura Fine. So I use a private browser. I don't like Google because it keeps a history and tracks me, so I use DuckDuckGo. And in the search engine, I put in State Senator Laura Fine. I didn't even have to put in Illinois State Senator Laura Fine. And sure enough, her website, senatorfine.com, pops up. Do this. Bookmark your state rep and your state senator. Bookmark your congressperson. And look at their websites from time to time. They will tell you. They'll tell you about money they were able to acquire for your district. They will tell you about bills that they have signed on to. They will tell you about things that they have voted for, that they believed in, and that are about to become law. You've got to be involved, you know. Luckily, Laura Fine gets to do all the work, and all I have to do is click a couple of things to find out what she's been supporting and what she's been doing. But you know what? Every time I think about it, I do it. And I especially do it when I know that we're approaching an election, because I want to make sure the people I voted into office are still working for me. I would advise you to do the same thing. Let's go to our good friend Dave, who's on the line from Hoffman Estates. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Joan. Yeah, that, like with Trump and these guys, appeasing to this dude, kind of like back in Hitler, they kept appeasing to him until finally attacked Poland. And that was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Same thing with this guy. And he's had, 4 years to strengthen his vindictiveness and evilness, but
he's had 4 years to surround himself with people who are more familiar with government than he ever was, people who know how to take government apart, which is what he really wanted to do the first time around. He just didn't know how to do it.
Right. I got to thinking, mentioned the other day, this, like what we're going through, seems to be a bit like that George Orwell's book, 1984. You know, and big government.
Though some people have said, everybody points to Animal Farm, but maybe we should reread Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where people are just sort of drugged into a kind of a mindless cooperation and not paying any attention.
Yeah, well, in that 1984, too, where they mentioned the big government and that totalitarian regime is able to manipulate their citizens into believing anything. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
And then the stark warning against the encroachment of oppressive governments on individual liberties, it urges readers to remain vigilant. Does that sound like anything from the left? To be vigilant against the threats. They're telling us to do the stuff, their job, what they're supposed to have done. But anyway, talking on the bird flu, do you recall back about 8-10 years ago, we had bird flu that time, remember? When
bird flu has been around for a while, yeah. And like most flu, we used to, many years ago, before we had all these other big illnesses to worry about, when I worked in the medical profession, wintertime was always referred to as pneumonia season. It gets hot, it gets cold, people sweat, they get chilled, and this was always pneumonia season. But flu loves this kind of weather, the changeable weather, and apparently other viruses enjoy it as well.
Yeah, I guess that's how they survive, and then, but like back that stuff I talked about where the crows that were dying, and I think some of the blue jays and that, from that bird flu, maybe this strain now is a mutation of that strain. Like you say, they keep, mutating into finding new hosts, and like you mentioned about the big cats and stuff at the zoos and that have caught that and died, so.
I know. It has been around for a while, but the one thing they've always been worried about and watched for was whether or not it was going to jump to another species. And that's why virologists are so scared, because now it's jumping into cows. And we're a lot more like cows than we are like chickens. So it's getting close.
Yeah. And lastly, so somebody else can still get their turn. On old Gold Barb Bob Menendez got convicted. He got it pretty quickly, in 11 years, but he'll probably be out in about 5 of good behavior or whatever. But why are they not dragging Rudy Giuliani into prison yet?
Yeah, well, they just Rudy Giuliani finally cut a deal with Shea Moss and I forget the other woman he defamed. I think having been involved in a relatively drawn-out court case, I can tell you that even when you're in the right, it takes a toll. And there was a negotiation a few months ago where Shea Moss and I'm sorry, I've blanked on the other woman's name. No, I know. Finally agreed with Rudy because they were entitled to literally everything he owned, and they agreed to let him keep his. He gets to keep his place in New York, and he's got a home in Florida. And they said that, and there were certain other sports memorabilia they let him keep. And supposedly now it's it's decided once and for all. Yeah, the World Series rings. He tried to say that were his son's, and then I think they got his son actually went to his apartment and tried to take some stuff out, but was caught. He was trying to take some of the sports memorabilia, and I think maybe a painting or two he was trying to get out with. Wow. And then they got a car, too. Didn't they get some kind of fancy... He's got I don't know what was decided about the car. But he was kind of flaunting it because the judge said the car was part of the deal. And then he took the car down to Florida and was very publicly driving all around in it, which didn't please the judge, not one little bit. Yeah, so I'd like to see him get his finally, too. But let me clear off so somebody else can get their turn. But thanks, Joe. Thanks, Dave. Be well. We're going to go to Hyde Park. Andrew is on the line. Hey, Andrew, sorry we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to get your call. I understand. Tammy Duckworth and Dick Durbin. Yeah, they're both doing the work. I've spoken with both of them many, many times, and I can understand. So let's not stop going to trying to reach them and all that. But let's also, I mentioned 2 weeks ago, let's get in touch with some of the Republican stations. Let's get in touch with some of the Republicans, senators and representatives. They're part of this country. They're part of this thing that's going to go down. When the country falls, the only thing, Andrew, that I have found, I've tried to do that before. If there's some big issue in some other state, I've tried getting in touch with the people who represent that state. But one of the first things these political, because you don't talk to the politician, you talk to an aide. And one of the first things they ask you is where you live or what your zip code is. And when they realize that you're not one of their voters, they don't care. They don't make a record of your call. They don't pass along your message. They don't care a bit. I understand, but if a bunch of us keep calling and remind them that this is about all of us, not just about the Democrats or the conservatives or whatever, but if enough of us keep calling, what I want to do is, and I ask you to do, is to push it out there to the people. Keep trying, keep dialing, So, it doesn't hurt. So we're not going to give up on this. No, we are not. Absolutely. Andrew, I've got to go. I've got to get to the news, but thank you so much for calling. We are going to do the news and be back, and we're going to discover what Donald Trump is up to with Ukraine, again, with Professor Joel Ostrow right after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joel Ostrow is familiar to you. You, of course, know he's a political science professor from Benedictine University who is an expert on all things Russia. We have been talking with him for many years now. And I still sometimes think, Joel, when I told you that I thought the Ukraine war was going to be over in a matter of months and how would things shake out, and you were just... I think you probably thought to yourself, how dumb could this woman be? But you didn't say that because you were very sweet. But this has been a very long, drawn-out affair. For those of you who may not have heard me at the beginning of the show, Joel sent me a link to a CNN article Remember how Donald Trump got impeached the first time because he wanted to blackmail Volodymyr Zelensky into saying something bad about Joe Biden before Donald Trump would release the funds? Well, Donald Trump wants something else from Ukraine these days. Apparently, it's minerals. Joel, explain it to the audience, if you would.
Yeah, well, first of all, Joan, you were in the overwhelming majority when you thought the war would be over quickly. We all thought that, or most people thought Russia would prevail quite quickly. And it has been the support of the United States and Ukraine's other allies that have enabled Ukraine to defend itself and initially reclaim a lot of its territory, and now it's been a long, long stalemate. So regarding the news today, first of all, as is typical, Donald Trump is trying to claim credit for something that others have done. And in this case, he's trying to take credit for an agreement that the Biden administration hammered out last year that in the event that Ukraine regains control over all of its territory, it will create conditions beneficial to American companies for the extraction of a variety of minerals that can be mined in the Donbass province. And indeed, those minerals are one of the main reasons that Russia wants that territory. But this is something that was already arranged by the Biden administration. Trump, I'm sure, is trying to extract terms that will be beneficial to himself, his family, and his close allies, as that's how he does. But in the general sense, there was an understanding already reached about American participation in the extraction of those minerals and benefiting American interests.
Well, the CNN article seems to imply that Trump isn't just taking credit for something Biden did, but that this is another one of his quid pro quos. I mean, I didn't have time to read the whole thing, but from what I was able to read, it sounds like, hey, you want aid, let's see those mineral deposits showing up.
Correct. But the point is that, well, the minerals can't show up. Russia occupies the territory, almost all of the territory where these minerals lie. And let's be clear, Trump also is, because of how deeply uninformed he is on most important topics, he's used the term rare earths, but there are 17 rare earth metals. I think there are maybe 12 of those that Ukraine has deposits of, and I think there might be 7 or 8 of which it has significant deposits. There are 50 critical minerals, 50 minerals that are deemed to be critical. Not all of those are rare earths. Ukraine has deposits of something like 27 or 28 of those. So it's really unclear what Trump is referring to. But yes, he has turned what was already an agreement into some quid pro quo, which just makes things more confusing, not less.
I believe the last I heard, it's 6 months. Trump's envoy to Ukraine says in 6 months they will have this conflict wrapped up. It was going to be day one after he was elected. And then they said, well, the first 100 days. And now I think the latest plan is, we will have this conflict resolved in 6 months. Do you think that timeline is viable?
I would ignore any such statements coming out of anyone affiliated with the Trump administration. They don't know what they're talking about.
Well, that's usually the way I look at it. Do you think that Ukraine would agree to some sort of? It's been said that if there were just a land bridge, like the southeastern part of Ukraine, if there was just a land bridge that Russia could take over to get them to and from Crimea, that might be one way that this could be settled. What do you think about that? You think Vlad's going to settle for that?
It depends what that land bridge looked like. If we're talking what Russia's initial vision for that was, which would be really all of eastern Ukraine. I can't see how or why Ukraine could agree to that. Most of its most significant economic interests that aren't agricultural, meaning grain exports, are located in that section. Not their industrial, but certainly their natural resources that have great economic value lie in those hills and those mountains. So I can't see Ukraine agreeing to that. Some access for Russia to Crimea is something that people have floated. It's hard to know what Ukraine would agree to. A lot's going to depend on what happens with continuing military support and, frankly, non-military support at this point. It is important to note that all aid has been terminated because of the efforts of Trump/Musk in halting all foreign aid. So right now, nothing is getting to Ukraine. That includes Band-Aids, medicines, any kind of aid. It's all been frozen. So much really depends on how that all plays out and what kind of pressure is levied on Ukraine. I am sure that Trump is going to try to make it look like he is saving Ukraine, but you really need to look into the details to see how badly he's devastating Ukraine. It really just depends how he sides. Right now, he's seems to have rankled Vladimir Putin a little bit with this claim that America, because Russia occupies that territory right now where all those minerals are. And so Trump suggesting that the United States is going to have access to that brought very swift and stern warnings out of the Kremlin, basically to butt out.
Interesting. And do you think that he thinks he can go toe-to-toe with Putin, that he thinks he can bully Putin the way he seems to be bullying anybody in the Republican Party here in the United States? And do you think he can bully Putin?
No. On the last one. Sorry for the really short answers. You're throwing up softballs today, Joan. I'm sorry.
Well, I read different things. On the one hand, it's like, anytime he wants to, Putin can crush Ukraine. He's just like taking it slow and seeing how things are going to shake out. And then I read other articles that say he's running out of munitions. He doesn't have enough soldiers. He's like a paper tiger. He might look like he's fierce, but really there's nothing behind it. And I read all of these things that are written in a way to convince me of the truthfulness of their argument. So I don't know what's what. How would you assess Russia and Putin in this Ukraine war right now?
It's really the most disturbing aspect of the outcome of the November election, because Russia was so obviously weakened, and having Trump win the election with his and the MAGA parties sort of kowtowing to Russia, bringing people like Tulsi Gabbard, who is clearly a Russian agent, to head our national intelligence. We know Russia was weak because they were starting to rely on North Korean weapons and then personnel to try to fight this war in Ukraine. Clearly, that is not something that Russia would normally welcome or even want. It was signifying their increasing weakness. And then the devastation of Hamas and Hezbollah and the weakening of Iran poses yet an even greater threat to Putin. So, if anything, Russia's in a better situation, and I think clearly Putin hoped that Trump would make good on his promise to end the war right away by sidling up to him. So there's probably some confusion going on in the Kremlin over where Trump stands and where the United States stands. And frankly, it looks like the White House is in a bit of disarray. Can't really decide what it wants there either. Which is why any talk of things ending quickly is kind of absurd.
I want to talk to you more about what is and is not going on at the White House. I'm talking to political science professor Joel Ostrow from Benedictine University. He is an expert on Russia, and we're going to continue our discussion right after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
I'm talking to Benedictine University political science professor Joel Ostrow. He's an expert in Russia. We were just talking about the situation in Ukraine. And, Joel, you said that you thought that the White House was a little bit in disarray as to what they were going to do with Ukraine or how that relationship was going to work. Why do you think that? Because Donald Trump, made it clear while he was campaigning, I'm all in on Putin. So why do you think that he's not all in on Putin right now?
Because since the election, he's sort of talked out of both sides of his mouth. He has met with Zelensky and made assurances to Zelensky. He has stated support for one or the other side, depending on who he's talking to in Europe. He says one thing when he's talking to his British counterpart or German counterpart. He says another thing when he's talking to his Hungarian or Slovak counterparts. So he has expressed support for both supporting and continuing to fund Ukraine's war effort and for cutting off everything to Ukraine. And if you look at the actions, the shuttering of USAID and the freezing of all foreign aid included no exception for Ukraine. It did for Egypt and for Israel, but it did not for Ukraine. So that tells you that at a minimum, they're undecided. At a maximum, they don't plan to support Ukraine. So it's really up in the air. And there are certainly voices inside the administration, most of whom are I consider the equivalent of or outright Russian agents. But then there are a few, most notably the Secretary of State Rubio, who has been pretty strong opponent, recognizing that the threat that Russia poses and supporter of continuing to back Ukraine. So I'm guessing they're still trying to sort that out, and time will tell how it goes. And in the meantime, we see Trump trying to lay the case for why we might continue to support Ukraine. I should point out that Ukraine's reserves are fairly significant, but we're not talking none of those rare earth metals. They have significant deposits, but on a global scale, those are pretty minor. The United States has more of those minerals on our territory, but we only have one facility to produce those, to refine those into any kind of usable products. China supplies more than 90% of the magnets that are needed for everything from electric cars to your electric toothbrush. And almost all of the usable material from those rare earths is refined and produced in China and exported, which is why the tariffs against China will only come back to haunt us.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when Zelensky was here in the United States and met privately with Mike Johnson, this was, of course, before the election, Mike Johnson came out and was like, we need to support these people. Mike Johnson doesn't seem to have been really vocal about supporting Ukraine since Trump was elected. Do you think he's switched his position? Was he insincere then, or is he just afraid now?
I'm going to give you another one of the short answers, I'm afraid. Mike Johnson there is no Mike Johnson. He doesn't speak for himself. And the words that come out of his mouth are not his own. He is like everyone else in the MAGA party. You'll note there is no longer a Republican Party. It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. So whatever the name's going to be, I'm not using the phrase anymore to refer to the majority in Congress. That we see unanimous committee approval of a foreign agent to be the director of national intelligence, and an anti-science buffoon to head Health and Human Services is just insane. So it's an authoritarian party with a dictatorial leader, and nobody below him has any voice of their own. And as soon as they do, they get ejected.
Well, that brings me back to your comment that Marco Rubio believed that thwarting Russia and supporting Ukraine was really important. Before he was confirmed, I heard people say, he may be the shortest run as Secretary of State in our history because the minute he disagrees with Donald Trump on anything, he's going to be gone. So does Marco Rubio have the courage to disagree with Trump on this?
No, and he hasn't been since it came out that he was the designee for Secretary of State. He has not uttered one word to contradict any of Trump's positions. He's been actually very careful, and has changed his tune towards supporting Trump's effort to end the war as quickly as possible, I think was the phrase he used in an interview last week. So he's bent the knee.
Yeah. Well, you know what? This was not a guy who ever struck me as somebody who had any kind of serious, moral compass or backbone. I mean, when you're supposedly so important to especially Cuban Americans in the state of Florida, man, you're really there to represent them. Oh, but if you make me vice president, I'll move somewhere else. Yeah. I mean,
the one policy that people thought, or I guess it would be two, is hardline policy towards Cuba and hardline policy towards Russia. People thought that it would be political suicide for him to back off of either of those. But apparently Trump and the MAGA party hold enough sway. And let's face it, the Cuban-American population has never really been particularly progressive or left. So where are they going to go anyway? So
there's always been in Republican circles this fear that if you disagree with Trump, he will use the bully pulpit to have you primaried and have you kicked to the curb. But I've gotten the sense recently that the boogeyman is more Elon Musk. I've got billions and billions of dollars. I could spend $100 million to get you defeated, and I wouldn't even notice the dent in my bank book. Somebody with a lot of power and clout got to Joni Ernst. Joni Ernst was on the committee that could have derailed Pete Hegseth's nomination to head DOD. If she had joined with the Democrats, Pete Hegseth would be dead. She initially signaled very strongly she didn't like him, and then she went radio silent and ended up voting for the nomination. And I don't think that was Donald Trump. My guess is that was Elon Musk can just, fund a dozen politicians to oppose you.
Well, that's the thing, right? So you can talk about Ernst there. You can talk about Haggerty with the Kennedy situation. The sad part is you can count on less than one hand the number of Republicans that we could I said I wasn't going to use that word. The number of people in Congress that may still have some drop of being Republican in them. There's too few, and that's part of the problem. So was Ernst on Hegseth, but she was alone. It was possibly Haggerty with Kennedy, but he's alone. And it's not that fear. They all agree. That whole MAGA party is an authoritarian party, and people are going to line their pockets at the expense of the rest of us. And Musk, number one of those. This is all about grift. It's our government is looking more and more like Putin's Russia.
Or
Orban.
Orban.
Autocracy. Yeah. No, worse than that. Much worse.
Really?
In terms of the corruption that is entrenching itself throughout the government. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see. We have 30 seconds. Can we end on a bright note? We're not dead yet. We're still here. We're still fighting. You're still teaching. I'm still talking.
Yeah. See what happens after the ice storm tomorrow night? Oh, no, wait. You said positive.
I thought the ice storm was supposed to come tonight. Isn't it?
No,
isn't it tonight? Oh.
No, it's tomorrow. Yeah.
Cook County weather advisory in effect until February 6th, but it's in effect now for sleet and freezing rain. Oh, I do so love freezing rain. Freezing rain, I think, is my favorite kind of weather. Yeah, because it can chill you to the bone and make you slip and slide and break all of your parts. That's good.
But honestly, it is very alarming. The move to shut down USAID, that's an agency created by Congress, by an act of Congress, funded by Congress, which is supposed to have the power of the purse. There's nobody standing up to or against this among all of the other acts. I'm just pointing out one, but it's throughout what used to be the United States government. Apparently it's a group of 19 to 24-year-old recent high school and college grads who were interns for Musk, who are carrying out his henchman work. And even the security at the State Department isn't standing up to them, or at Treasury. And who stands to benefit from all of this? It's not going to be the American people. And certainly our allies around the world have to be looking at us with horror.
Yeah, really. As are we, looking at ourselves with horror. Yeah. Joel, thank you for the CNN update, and thank you for all of the discussions. Even when we can't find a silver lining, I still like to talk to you.
As always, thank you so much, Joan. And maybe next time there'll be some silver linings.
Yes, let's count on it. We're going to take a break. We are going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We always like to keep an eye on our neighbor to the north. Interesting things are always happening in Wisconsin. Recently, there was a move in the Wisconsin State House to put together a voter ID bill, the idea being that Republicans want to make it harder for especially minorities in the state of Wisconsin. You know, the people who usually don't vote Republican, they want to make it more difficult for people to vote. Instead of making it easier, they're making it more difficult. So we asked Wisconsin State Senator Kelda Roys if she would join us, and she's a member of the Senate Judiciary and Public Safety Committee in Wisconsin and has some thoughts on some of these bills. Thank you so much for being here, Kelda. It's so nice to talk to you.
It's great to be with you.
So tell us about this new move to make it more difficult to vote.
Well, this is part of a longstanding Republican Party project to try to keep power any way that they can. In this case, by making it harder for people to exercise their freedom to vote. So this proposal would take Wisconsin's existing voter ID law, which is one of the strictest in the nation, and put it right into the Constitution, so that even if somebody felt that their lawful right to vote was abridged in some way, it would be harder for them to say, hey, you violated my rights, and go to court and have their day in court. It is, in my view, a pretty naked attempt to try to influence the outcome of the Wisconsin Supreme Court election that's happening on April 1st, because liberals, you may recall, 2 years ago took control of the court after decades and ended the gerrymandering that had put Republicans in total control of the state for many years. And Republicans see this as their opportunity to get power back. This outcome of this election will control who is in charge of the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Yes, I can't believe your Supreme Court is up for grabs again. The election of Janet Protasevich almost killed me.
You're not alone. Yes, I mean, but it has restored the promise of democracy in Wisconsin. You know, for years we were the most gerrymandered state in the nation, and it didn't matter what the vast majority of Wisconsinites wanted in terms of public school funding or standing up for reproductive rights or making sure PFAS aren't in our water, because Republicans just were free to ignore it. And now, in the last election cycle, even though we had these tough national headwinds, Democrats picked up many seats in the Senate and the Assembly, basically every competitive race, and we are on the verge of, in 2026, being able to take the majority in the legislature and have a Democratic legislature in Wisconsin, which, was pretty normal for most of our state's history. We've always flipped back and forth. It's not normal for Democrats to be locked out of power for a generation, and that's what got Republicans so terrified that they're willing to pull out all the stops.
I've seen this in Wisconsin. We've reported on the Republicans in North Carolina who've basically tried to gum up the works as much as humanly possible as they walk out the door. There was even a challenge. A woman defeated a Republican for a seat on the bench in North Carolina, and her opponent said, "Oh, wait a minute. The 60,000 of her voters, they really should be not counted." And it was like, oh, my God, this woman won fair and square. And Republicans, especially in state legislatures, if it's a free and fair election, Republicans tend to lose. I'm old enough, Kelda, to remember when Republicans first started losing elections. And there was actually talk in Republican circles about, hey, we're losing a lot of these, especially like minority voters. We should really think our platforms and our policies, and we should figure out what those voters want, and we should incorporate it into how we say we're going to govern. And that lasted, it feels like, looking back on it, that lasted for about 10 minutes. And then it was like, oh, wait, let's just go the other route. Let's just make it really hard for them to vote. Let's disqualify them. Let's take them off the voter rolls. That's so much easier. It feels like in states where fair maps exist, Republicans realize that they made a mistake all those years ago, not changing to woo voters rather than trying to prevent anybody from voting.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing now is that there is really no distance between Trump and sort of the MAGA wing and the broader Republican Party. They are all willing to do whatever it takes to get power and to keep power at any cost. And if the cost is not just our individual rights and freedoms, but our actual democracy, that's a price that they're willing to pay, and we're the ones that have to, unfortunately, foot the bill for that. And, what I've been telling people who are beside themselves with sadness or anger, frustration about what's happening in Washington and what Trump and Musk and his allies are up to is, hey, for every angry post you want to send, you got to take an action that's pro-democracy. In Wisconsin, we've got this pivotal Supreme Court election on April 1st. Susan Crawford is a judge, a former prosecutor, someone who has spent her career advocating for groups like Planned Parenthood as an attorney, standing up for the rights of victims. And she is going to be a fair and impartial justice if she's on the court. On the other hand, her opponent, Brad Schimmel, is someone who praised Donald Trump for pardoning the violent domestic terrorists of January 6th. Someone who, when he was attorney general, let 6,000 rape kits go untested for years. Someone who has said he wants to ban all abortions. He supports the 1849 law that's still on Wisconsin's book to make abortion completely unavailable. So the choice really couldn't be clearer. And, anybody who's wants to say, like, well, what can I do to have an impact, or how can I channel my distress over what's happening in Trump, this is a great way to do it. I mean, get active in the Supreme Court race, because this is going to determine the future of democracy in Wisconsin and potentially, the whole country, because Wisconsin's such an important bellwether state.
I am talking to Wisconsin State Senator Kelda Roys She is a Democrat. She represents the 26th District. We are going to take a real quick break, and we are going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joining me is Wisconsin State Senator Kelda Roys. We have been talking about what's going on in this state legislature in our neighbor to the north. Kelda, I know recently that you wrote a guest column for the recombobulation area about reproductive freedom. Tell our audience what you wrote about.
Well, basically, Wisconsin had a very interesting election cycle. Although Trump very narrowly won our state, we reelected our great U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, and in the legislature, we picked up, every competitive state Senate race and 10 state assembly seats. And it was largely because Democrats focused on our core message, and we did not retreat from our values about, our dedication to lowering costs for working families, health care, housing, prescription drugs, the big ones, and protecting reproductive freedom. People do not want to live in an anti-choice dystopia. They want to have their rights and freedoms protected, and Wisconsin Democrats and our candidates did not shrink away from that. We led with our values. We talked about freedom, personal autonomy, and the right to abortion as an essential one that politicians should never get involved with. We shared personal stories, and the voters rewarded us for that. We made it clear what the stakes are. Republicans want to keep an 1849 total abortion ban on the books. That's their goal. And if they win the Supreme Court race on April 1st, if their candidate wins, that law will be the law of the land in Wisconsin going forward. And by the way, they'll re-gerrymander the state, too. But if we want abortion to be legal, we have got to elect Democrats, and we've got to have Susan Crawford on the Supreme Court. And that message was really effective for us.
Yeah, I know that our good friends at Up North News also ran an article on you and your mission about to make sure that abortion rights were restored. And it's just, I understand that it was an ignored law and it just triggered with Dobbs and the fall of Roe v. Wade. But to know that you live in a state where you're going to be governed by a law that was written in 1846, I mean, it's just, we should also pass all those laws about, our wagon wheels and what kinds of materials we can use to cover our Conestoga wagons as we travel west. It's just right. It's just amazing. It's just amazing to me. I don't know if you know this because I know you have worked with some of our partners, but Heartland Signal actually had put on their website a soundbite from you. Paul Shivari is going to play it now, and we can talk about what you said right after this. Listen, Paul, play it.
It's really disappointing to see the misplaced priorities of the majority party that in the wake of the incredible tragedy in my district at a school just a few weeks ago, that we're making it harder to vote than it is to buy a gun in this country. The right to vote is fundamental, and we should be looking for ways to make it easier and less complicated so that more people can participate. What this bill does is it puts into the Constitution a discriminatory law that was, in its purpose and in its conception, intended to suppress votes of groups that were not favored by the Republicans in the majority at that time. That's not my conjecture. That's not liberal publications. That is sworn testimony in court from Republicans who were in the room when the initial voter ID law was passed, that they were giddy and frothing at the mouth at the prospect of Democrats being unable to win because Democratic voters would be disproportionately affected. And certainly it's not only Democrats, but elections are a numbers game, right? And if you disenfranchise one Republican voter for every 3 or 4 Democratic voters or every 10 Democratic voters, it's going to be of benefit to you in a state as closely divided as Wisconsin. It is yet another way that the Republican Party in this state has operated our beautiful, wonderful democracy as a kind of banana republic, doing everything at all costs to cement your own power and make it hard by rigging the game.
Wisconsin State Senator Kelda Roys, Democratic state senator representing Wisconsin's 26th district, bringing the heat. Kelda, I love your passion.
My favorite thing to do.
Yes, we do that a lot here too. And you know what? You've got to lay it out for people. Sometimes my listeners get really frustrated that Democrats, first of all, don't know how to talk to real people using like real words. They know there are so many Democrats, particularly on Capitol Hill, that's like they want to try to out professor the next one. You know, I'm so intelligent and I'm so detached, and let me tell you what's the truth and how things are. And one thing that I think makes people like you so effective is you talk the way people talk. You explain things the way people understand. You don't talk down to anybody.
Well, I think that's probably my mom's influence, because she's a social worker, and she always said, look for the good in people. And my gosh, I mean, I really do try to do that. Even with my Republican colleagues, when they've, frustrated me, at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock, at 4 o'clock, I'm still trying to figure out, well, maybe there's something I can do here. But at the end of the day, I do think we really have an obligation to be honest with people about what's happening and what's going on. And I spend a lot of time knocking on doors, talking with voters, and really listening, more than explaining myself, is I really want to hear what's on people's minds. And that's how I know what to emphasize and what to talk about. And so when I think about, this April 1st election that's coming up, we need to be out knocking on doors, because what I'm hearing from people is that they are really scared about what happens during a Trump presidency if the Wisconsin Supreme Court becomes a rubber stamp and Wisconsin is just another client state for Trump and Musk, and abortion becomes immediately unavailable in our state. And that's a great way to get people motivated to go out and vote, and to get them motivated to, hey, come volunteer, knock on some doors. This is a way to channel that energy.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what it takes. I also think that one of the things the Democrats have to be better at, and the younger Democratic people who are running for office, I think, are smarter about this and how to use social media, because we have just lived through a presidential election where we were told basically low information voters probably turned the tide. Yes, there were millions of Democrats, registered Democratic voters, who stayed home, and we need to figure out what's going on there. But the people who did come out and vote, oftentimes, they're not the people reading the New York Times. They're not the people who are reading even their local publications. But, a lot of times they're on social media. And I think the younger generation of politicians knows how to go to those platforms and reach out to people in a way that is more effective than maybe even holding a press conference. What do you think?
Well, I think we've got to be talking to people everywhere. I mean, we have a huge structural problem in this country with media imbalance, with corporate-owned media, and with rampant disinformation and propaganda, especially on social media platforms. And that is. That's something that we have to solve over the long term. But in the meantime, I will never turn down an invitation to go on Fox News or something like that, because my goal is to try to reach people in the audience and get them nodding their heads along. I mean, I really do think the vast majority of the people who voted for Trump, or at least, enough of the people who voted for Trump to put him over the edge, are not voting for what's happening. They didn't want to basically give Elon Musk our Social Security numbers on a thumb drive to sell to China. Right?
Who saw that coming?
Vote,
and even frankly,
they did not vote for this.
Early on in the program, one of the South Florida stations ran a clip from a woman representing documented Venezuelan immigrants who, she said, we were told by Republicans we would not be the ones deported. We were told that Donald Trump would protect us, that Republicans would protect us. She said, we feel more than betrayed. She said, she was like, we were lied to. And I'm thinking to myself, how many more times are we going to hear stories like that? I didn't think he would take away this program. This program is something my family actually uses. I thought he would do the other stuff, the other people.
Right. And, what's next is, I didn't think Trump was so anti-choice. I didn't think he was just going to take away abortion medication and start using the post office and the Justice Department to try to prosecute moms and grandmas who help people go across lines to get health care. But that is what's going to happen. And it is our job to make sure that we are welcoming people in as they are waking up to the nightmare that Trump is, and that we are converting their anger into political energy, right? We've got to be bringing people in to our big tent, even if they don't agree with us on everything, even if they weren't always with us. We've got to welcome them and say, just like we welcomed in the Never Trumpers, right, to help build our coalition that helps to elect Joe Biden. We've got to continually be doing that. And it's more important now than ever because everything's on the line.
Are there any particular bills that you are co-sponsoring coming up that's on anything we have not touched on yet?
Well, I think the big thing is that Democrats in Wisconsin, and I think across the country, are really responding to the high cost of living. So we're prioritizing things like expanding access to affordable health care, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, addressing the high cost of housing, right? Housing has become a huge issue. Lack of child care and affordable child care. All the issues that are really pinching families and making it hard for folks to keep above water. That's what Democrats are focusing on. And at the same time, we are focused on protecting people's rights, whether that's your right to have an abortion, your right to love who you love, your right for your children to learn in a good public school, your right to vote. Democrats are the party that are defending these traditional core American values of freedom and equal opportunity and pluralism and religious freedom. That is the Democratic Party. And we've just got to get back to people knowing that about us and identifying that with our brand.
I think that you have got exactly the kind of attitude that we need going forward, and I wish you all the best of luck. We will be keeping an eye on what's going on in Wisconsin, and we will probably be talking again, Kelda. Thanks for the conversation today.
I'd love to. Anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was Wisconsin State Senator Kelda Roys. She's a Democrat. She represents Wisconsin's 26th district. And like I said, our good friends at Up North News wrote an article about her in 2024. She has done a guest column for the Recombobulation area about reproductive freedom in Wisconsin. And she's somebody that we are definitely going to be staying in touch with. I want to let you know that coming up after the news, we are doing what is one of our most fun segments of the month. We are going to be doing our media segment with longtime newswoman Jennifer Schulze, Mark Jacob, who writes the Stop the Presses newsletter. We are going to be talking about one of the things Kelda just mentioned. Who put Elon Musk in charge? And our members of the Fourth Estate, our members of the news media, really telling people what they need to know to protect themselves against this, what is seemingly a takeover of the government by Elon Musk. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the networks, the television networks, apparently deciding that capitulating to Donald Trump is easier than fighting Donald Trump. And we are going to be talking about the departure from CNN of Jim Acosta. Jim Acosta had the anchor chair for, I believe he was on at 10 a.m., and his ratings were through the roof. But he was a thorn in Donald Trump's side. So CNN, in all their wisdom, decided that they were going to move Jim Acosta from his morning slot and put him on from midnight to 2 a.m. Apparently, when the managers at CNN pitched Jim Acosta on this job change, they told him, well, you know, you're going to be a prime time anchor. Prime time in California, and you know what? We'll let you move to California and do your show from there. Midnight to 2 a.m. And they were trying to convince him somehow that it was a weird kind of promotion. Jim Acosta left CNN, has his own Substack, and has said that in the near future he might be announcing a couple of other ventures. You know, I knew that Donald Trump would do bad things. And because of people like the folks from the Heritage Foundation, I knew he would do bad things faster than he did before, and probably on a larger scale than he did before. But I didn't think, even if the New York Times capitulated and soft-pedaled Donald Trump, I didn't think the broadcast networks would do that. I didn't think that they would all roll over. As one person on social media put it, it's like all the mainstream media, the legacy media, is like a puppy. And they've gone up to Donald Trump and they've laid down on their back with their feet in the air, presenting their belly. It's as good a description as any, I think. We are going to talk about all that and more when we come back after the news with our regular monthly media segment right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
This is our regular monthly media segment. I'm joined by Mark Jacob, who writes the Stop the Presses newsletter. You can subscribe at stopthepresses.news. Also was an editor at the Trib and the Sun-Times and works with Courier Newsroom. Jennifer Schulze, who has a Substack called Indistinct Chatter. Also, you can find her op-eds on Heartland Signal. She is a longtime Chicago newswoman. We have a lot to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know. I know we have a whole list of topics to touch on, but Mark, I don't know if you realize at least I just got it minutes ago. Maybe I've got a filter that slows things down. But just a few minutes ago, I got the newest edition of Indistinct Chatter showing up in my mailbox. If Mark hasn't had a chance to read it, Jennifer, you want to give him the Cliff's Notes?
Oh, he's seen it.
I've read it, but the listeners may not have. Why don't you?
Right. Well, my point in today's piece is that it's a coup. Call it that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And it is, I believe, the most serious story in the country right now. And I appreciate the fact that it's undercover mostly, right? They're trying to hide everything from us. And that it's happening really fast in all kinds of different places. But this is what journalism is made for. And I think that there's everybody, it's like I said in the piece, it's all hands on deck.
Jennifer,
tariffs are important.
Jennifer, you're talking about Elon Musk attacking federal agencies, kind of grabbing federal data that he has no rights to and trying to put USAID in a wood chipper. You're talking about Elon Musk, who nobody elected, attacking these federal agencies, right? That's
absolutely. And I just read that, let's see, they've gone through 4, maybe 5 agencies. They're apparently targeting the Department of Labor next. They've been in the General Services.
I thought it was education that was on the block next.
Well, that was already announced this morning. So,
I'm sorry.
every government agency is under attack, led by Elon Musk, like Mark said, unelected. We don't know what restraints, if any, are on him. We don't know what protocols, if any, anybody's following. We should suspect they probably aren't. I mean, some of the reporting is they're using unsecured emails. The group of young men, it's like the Lost Boys. It's about 6 of them between 19 and 24. One just graduated from high school. And they're running through the government and changing source code. I'm not a tech person, but I know that's bad.
Yeah,
and
changing source code is going to mean they're the only ones going forward who have access.
Right. They are into the Treasury Department's $6 trillion payment system where the government pays Social Security, pretty much everything. And they now have access to everyone in the country's data. They know our Social Security numbers. They know all the kinds of stuff. I'm sure they'll be in the IRS soon if they haven't. And it's terrifying. And I think news coverage needs to reflect it. I mean, I don't want to minimize efforts by Democratic politicians and activist groups. But I think
you mean like Maxwell Frost?
Yeah, I mean, they're right now. They just locked Congress, members of Congress out of the Department of Treasury, U.S. Department of Treasury, who they wouldn't let them in to see what was going on.
Yeah, I think Maxwell Frost is the youngest member of Congress right now, isn't he? I think he's like 28, and he just led a group of people over to the Treasury building, and they were not allowed to enter the Treasury building.
Because they're just members of Congress. Yeah, that's not good enough. And the Republican members of Congress are allowing all this to happen. That's a really frightening thing, is that they're giving away
what I think the mainstream media needs to point out more, because you don't have this kind of a takeover if the other people in power, the other branch of government, is fighting you tooth and nail. The only reason that they're allowed to do this is because the Republicans in Congress are rolling over and the Republicans in the Senate are silent.
Right.
Well, yes, but Trump gave him the keys. Right.
Yeah. Oh, well, so, I'm not. I'm not absolving Donald Trump at all. I'm just saying that you don't pull off a coup like this without help.
No, of course not. No, if the Congress, there might as well not be Congress right now, right? I mean, there are supposed to be 3 distinct bodies right here. Where's Congress? Non-existent.
One thing that I think, well, you guys know, of course, that tomorrow there's going to be a big protest at noon at the Federal Plaza. Indivisible and some other groups, they're going to deliver a letter. The Tammy Duckworth and Dick Durbin's offices are there, and they're going to deliver a letter that basically say, no business as usual. Fight, delay, use every procedural thing. You've got to get up and fight. And the thing that makes me feel like we are really starting to see some fire from the grassroots. I've had a lot of people call me at the beginning of the show today saying that they have been trying to call those senators' offices, and the phone lines are jammed. And if they do get through to like a voicemail, they're given the information that the voicemail is full. So people are getting up, and I'm just sorry. I mean, I'm glad the grassroots are getting up and pointing this out. I just wish there was a little bit more leadership from Democrats in positions of power. I mean, we're starting to see it, but between what we're not getting from Democratic leaders and what we're not getting from legacy media, I mean, it's like, what is the point of CBS paying off Trump because they dared to interview Kamala Harris. You know, why did ABC pay off Trump when George Stephanopoulos had a case that most lawyers, almost all lawyers I talked to, said was a slam dunk winner? It's the media is also letting this coup happen, I think. Mark, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, well, I think that's true. And I mean, people should read what Jennifer wrote, because she talked about how some independent and journalists and other publications are doing a good job. Wired, for example, is doing an excellent job in revealing stuff. But, the major media, you have to worry about them, because CBS might just fold up as far as honest reporting on Trump. I'm just really worried about it. If they give up, if the lawsuit that Trump filed suggests that they're not allowed to edit their own interview with Kamala Harris, and which is crazy. And it's a lawsuit. There it is. And if CBS settles that, they're betraying not only their most important news show, 60 Minutes, but the whole journalism industry. It's really we're in really scary times, and people need to step up. I'm glad you mentioned that rally at noon in the Federal Plaza in Chicago tomorrow, because people are going to have to make their voices heard.
Yeah, they absolutely are, and I think that Democratic governor call that was made to Chuck Schumer, which from what I read was organized in large part by J.B. Pritzker, where the Democratic governor is calling Chuck Schumer saying, dude, do something. You can't this isn't business as usual. This isn't, everybody wants us to work in a bipartisan manner. Not when the other side tells you to go pound sand.
No, in this situation, bipartisanism it's surrender. I mean, why are Democrats in the U.S. Senate voting for Trump nominees for cabinet positions? Why are they doing that? I mean, what we're seeing is an all-out assault on our system of government, and Democrats think they're going to earn some brownie points by being nice. No, we don't need nice now. That's the last thing we need.
I agree. Jennifer?
Today, I just read that some senators who had voted in the committee level to move a nominee forward then voted against him in the actual vote. So that's just happened, in a couple of days since the phone calls have started. So I think we should try to look for some positive here, although, I'm always ragging on the media. I want to say that these efforts build, and this one is building. Excuse me, you guys. And you can see it. It's happening. There's more stories about it. There's more protests about it. The activist groups are on fire. You can't get through to congressional offices, like you said, Joan. I do want to say they always recommend that you call the local offices, because the D.C. offices get jammed, and when the phone lines there don't work, you're more likely to get through. All these folks have local and regional offices. Look up those numbers and call those.
And, I realize that this mass grassroots efforts to get people at the Senate level to start using every procedural trick in the book, slow it down, make it difficult, vote against it. Indivisible just sent out an email that I got in my box about 5 minutes ago, where they are protesting the fact that 22 Senate Democrats voted to confirm Doug Collins as Secretary of Veterans Affairs. And one of those senators is Dick Durbin. I wonder if he's going to hear about that tomorrow when Indivisible shows up at his Chicago office.
Well, the real problem is, Durbin's an example of this. And it's this idea that if Democrats play nice, and if we respect norms, which is like, for example, Marco Rubio being confirmed 99-0, that the Republicans will play nice. Well, they won't play nice. They never have played nice during this entire Trump era. And that's where you get Merrick Garland and his horrible mistake as far as not trying to prosecute Trump when he could have been prosecuted, is that he was following what he thought were the norms. This is not a normal time. Normal responses aren't going to work. And then here we have Marco Rubio, who is being praised on MSNBC as a moderate. And here's an example of someone Trump should have made. Well, Marco Rubio, if you've seen him on TV in the last few years, he's always apologizing for Trump. And what is he doing now? He is helping dismantle USAID, the foreign aid. He's helping do that. He's the one who cut this incredibly horrible deal with El Salvador, in which they say they're willing to take U.S. prisoners and incarcerate them in El Salvador. And Trump just said a few minutes ago that he thought that was a great idea. And I mean, it's an illegal idea. You can't deport U.S. citizens even if they're in prison. You can't do that. And if we did do that, if we took prisoners we didn't like in our jails and sent them to El Salvador and paid El Salvador to incarcerate them, who's going to make sure that there's not cruel and unusual punishment there? I mean, it is outrageous. And that's Marco Rubio, Mr. 99-0 confirmation. This has got to stop. I mean, people like Durbin and Schumer, in my opinion, they need to either wake up or get out of the way, because they're not helping enough.
Dick Durbin is really interesting, because just when I'm ready to write him off as too traditional to get anything done in this current atmosphere, then all of a sudden it's like something gets to be a burr under his saddle and he comes out swinging. And then that Dick Durbin, you're like, yeah, it's about time. And then that Dick Durbin disappears and he goes back to Mr. Business as usual, Dick Durbin. So I don't know. I think Dick Durbin has done a lot. He got a lot of federal judges on the bench. I hope he doesn't run again. I really, really hope he doesn't run again. And I think based on, I have a very Democratic audience, and I'm telling you, they are not happy with Dick Durbin at all. We need to take a break. I've chatted with you guys a little longer than I should. I'm talking to Jennifer Schulze and Mark Jacob. This is our regular media segment. We're going to be back real quick.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm talking with longtime newswoman, author of the Substack Indistinct Chatter, Jennifer Schulze, and creator and writer of the Stop the Presses newsletter, Mark Jacob. We are talking about the media and getting back to that. We touched briefly on this idea that somehow CBS and ABC seem to be capitulating on Trump, paying him millions of dollars over frivolous cases that they would otherwise win. Do you think they are worried about Trump's new head of the Federal Communications Commission, Brendan Carr? I mean, is this about protecting themselves from any sort of federal challenge to their license?
Yes.
Well,
and yes, and yes. So here's what I think is happening, and I don't think it's a surprise to anybody. I mean, Trump's threatened the media organizations like crazy. These media organizations are also now in lots of different businesses, right? So where maybe once a long time ago, CBS was a radio network and a TV network, now it's all kinds of things. It's part of a huge company. Like ABC is part of Disney. And so CBS wants to do other things in other parts of its company. And the reporting is that they're worried that if they don't give Trump a $25 million bribe or give him the documents and all this stuff, then they won't be able to do a merger that has nothing to do with CBS News. It's over here, it's two other companies. And that's the same problem with ABC, right? Disney was worried that Trump would put the hammer down on some Disney stuff, so they paid him off in the George Stephanopoulos ABC News thing.
Yeah, that's totally right. I mean, what Paramount is the parent company of CBS now, and Paramount wants to do a merger with Skydance Media. Requires government approval. Requires government approval, and the MAGA people, including Brendan Carr, are making it abundantly clear that they're going to get in the way of it unless CBS, plays nice. So there's you see this in other aspects of media too. I mean, Jeff Bezos, the fact that he went soft on Trump at the Washington Post, that wasn't because of the Washington Post. That was because he's worried about Amazon and various
Blue
other
Sky.
things. Right, and not Blue. Well, it's not Blue
Getting
Sky.
government contracts. Because remember, I don't know if it was Trump himself or one of his officials was visiting the Blue Sky like 3 days before Bezos decided to spike the endorsement of Kamala Harris?
Blue Origin, I think.
Blue Origin.
Blue Origin.
Whatever,
yeah.
whoever those people are.
Yeah,
the
that's
penis
his
rockets.
rocket company.
That's how I know them. The penis rockets.
Yeah.
But that's where they have the leverage on them, and this is why this kind of giant billionaire ownership of media is a bad thing. Same thing in at the Los Angeles Times is that guy has a big healthcare concerns, and he which could be affected by Trump's policies. So one thing to be really clear on is that Trump keeps on saying, well, I'm going to pull the license of these stations, of these networks, if he doesn't like them. They don't really need his approval. The FCC doesn't approve their licenses, but their affiliates, their local affiliates, do require renewal that goes through the FCC. So CBS, ABC, and NBC all still own local affiliates in various cities. And the way that the Trump administration could squeeze them at the FCC would be for them to refuse to renew their licenses. And so, so in effect, that'd be the same thing as not. They don't need the overall ABC, CBS, and NBC don't need approval from the federal government, but the individual affiliates do.
Let's also just add that Carr he's not legit. I mean, he's a real person and all of that, but he is as hard right an extremist as they come. Right. And right. He has no intention of doing the job of FCC chair. He is an instrument of Donald Trump. And so everything that comes out of his mouth is in service to Donald Trump. It isn't about making communications better for people in rural America, or it's not about anything. It's only about Donald Trump. And when you know that and keep reminding yourself of that, then it all makes sense. Because there's nothing legit about this, as Mark said, and Joan, you know this. Mm-hmm. The complaint, the $25 million complaint, was about editing an interview clip. I'm sorry, but that's crazy town.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, like a TV station can't decide how to edit its own clip, its own interview it did with somebody.
It was a nuisance lawsuit. It was just designed to assuage his ego. It was never something that was legitimate.
I do want to say, if they get the video and they get the transcript, that is going to be some kind of level of harassment against Kamala Harris that I just think is going to be unforgivable. Because, who knows what they'll do with it and how they'll turn it into whatever they'll turn it into. That work product should not leave CBS News, but it probably is going to. And we need to be prepared for that, because who knows? She probably did, stumble here or there, maybe on a couple of who knows, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what really happened. They're going to take that and turn it into some kind of Armageddon.
Well, and here this sets up a whole pattern where Trump or one of his allies can sue a news organization, and then, for any stupid reason, and then they can bring a bunch of heat on them, and in effect, the money people at those news organizations say, well, okay, I guess we'll just have to pay it just to get it off of our books, just to avoid the hassle. And you know what that is? That's protection money. That's Trump setting up a protection racket. And and another thing that's just toxic about that is that, Jennifer and Joan, you guys both have worked in news organizations. You will know that if that becomes the norm, that you're expecting to get sued for stupid reasons all the time, well, there's a lot of stories you're not going to publish. You're just not. You're going to say, well, I'd like to say this, and the lawyers are going to say, no, too risky, don't do it. And the public's never going to know what stories you did not publish because you were afraid to. And then it's a gigantic intimidation of the news media. It'll be lethal to the free flow of information in a democracy.
Guys, we need to take a break. I'm joined by Jennifer Schulze, longtime newswoman, writes a Substack called Indistinct Chatter, and also writes some op-eds for our sister Heartland Signal, and Mark Jacob, who does the Stop the Presses newsletter. You can find out how to subscribe if you go to stopthepresses.news. We will be right back after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
This is our monthly media segment. I'm joined by Stop the Presses newsletter writer Mark Jacob. He also used to work at the Trib and the Sun-Times. And Jennifer Schulze, longtime Chicago TV newswoman, has a Substack. Your frog is catchy, Jennifer. It has a Substack called Indistinct Chatter. Are you infecting me over the radio waves? Before I want to make sure we touch on this. Not that it's the most important topic of the day, but I don't want us to forget about what happened with Jim Acosta. Jim Acosta, morning CNN anchor, by all accounts, had terrific ratings. And they wanted to bury him. Again, we've been talking about a network capitulation to Donald Trump. This sure seems like that. Donald Trump, the president of the United States, went out of his way to gloat when Jim Acosta left CNN. I guess in a weird way, I guess that's kind of like being on Nixon's enemies list. Maybe like a badge of honor. What do you guys think about CNN letting Jim Acosta slip through their fingers?
Well, it actually was the subject of my Stop the Presses newsletter this week, was how CNN is trying to find some non-existent middle ground between telling the facts and appeasing the right wing, and you can't, because the right wing is lying all the time. And their credibility, they're just undermining their own credibility when they do that. When they have like Scott Jennings on the air to just say ridiculous things. And
you mean lies?
Yeah, right.
Those would be lies.
Well, lies and just goofy spin on stuff, like saying Jimmy Carter was anti-Semitic and stuff like that. I mean, just nutball stuff that's somehow they think is going to attract some right-wing viewers, and it's just not going to work. I mean, Fox News is doing really well attracting people, and the people that are watching Fox News clearly want to be lied to, because Fox News had to pay $750 million, not that long ago, for lying about the 2020 election, and they didn't seem to lose their audience. So these people apparently like being lied to, and so CNN, instead of just trying to just tell the truth and prosper that way, they've just decided that they need to, for marketing positioning reasons, they need to try to be nicer to Trump. And there's been reporting on this, that the guy who's in charge of CNN now called in as anchors and said, hey, we need to start afresh with Trump. We can't dwell on the past, and we have to give him a chance. And interestingly, the words twice impeached and convicted felon didn't appear in CNN's coverage on Inauguration Day. So successfully, they've disappeared the past. There's no memory anymore. We're just moving forward and pretending Trump might be just a great guy. And it doesn't work. And Acosta, what happened with Acosta was he was too good at blowing up right-wing lies. And, obviously that made him an enemy. And his ratings were good, as you say. But what they decided to do with him is, well, we're going to give you a new cool new assignment. You have like the overnight shift.
Yeah,
it's going to be
no. What they told him was, you're going to be prime time, just prime time on the West Coast. And if you want to, if you want to move to LA to do your show there, we'll support you in that because it's gonna. We're not burying you. We're giving you prime time.
Right. I know it was so cynical, and Acosta obviously knew how ridiculous it was, and he just said forget it, I'm gone. And I don't know. I think CNN has missed so many chances to do the right thing, and and failed. And I keep on wanting them to be good because we need news outlets like that to be good, and CNN I think they've just failed.
Yeah.
I want to add that they have the same problem we were talking about before. They're owned now and have been for a while, by a much larger company that is doing other things. And so CNN isn't a standalone news operation like it was in the glory days when Ted Turner had it. And it's been part of a larger corporation for quite some time. And the pressures from the leadership in that larger corporation are surely what is happening here. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem for news outlets. It turns out that ownership matters. and if you're a cog in a big wheel, you're probably in today's world going to find that the people who own you, literally own you, aren't really wanting you to be journalists.
I've got to ask you guys something because this has been bothering me. By all reports, I have no idea what Jake Tapper makes, but Anderson Cooper makes $25 million a year. And it was reported, I think, by us, what's his name, Oliver Darcy, who used to work for CNN, that Anderson and Jake, as the two top anchors, were called into the big boss's office before the inauguration. And like you said, Mark, they were told, let's not, we want to stay positive. Let's not be negative. The message was, you're not going to talk about the fact that he has 34 felony convictions. Apparently, neither one of them said, you know what? I understand where you're coming from and you don't want to alienate the new president, but I'm telling you that the fact that this guy is the first person to be inaugurated as a convicted felon, that is news, and that is what we were supposed to be doing. I'm not going to, pound away at it, but to tell us that we shouldn't even mention that goes against our very reason for being. And apparently neither one of them said anything. And I was so disappointed in that. Where was the pushback?
Well, it's what I'm saying. It's like they're trying to be, they're trying to be half pregnant. They are. You see that from Tapper. I mean, and I get into that in the newsletter, how sometimes he's really tough. Like he was really tough on RFK Jr. recently. But at the same time, during the inauguration coverage, he's talking about how, Trump really was managed to have a sense of normalcy about him during the campaign. Is he out of his mind? Normalcy?
Yeah, because it's so normal to just, say, oh, nobody wants me to answer questions. Let's just dance for 38 minutes because that is so normal.
or talk about immigrants and lie about immigrants eating dogs and cats, or tell a rally crowd about a dead golfer's private parts and how big they are. I mean, that's normalcy. I mean, what was Tapper doing there? I mean,
I don't know.
It's like he's trying to look tough and newsy for.
He wants to look tough when it doesn't cost him anything.
Exactly.
That's
a
little
really
more
good way to put it.
complicated than that. I think it's a really difficult time to be those people, and I'm not excusing anything that they're doing, but I think that the lines, except maybe not in the last 2 weeks, but prior to that, I think the lines were moving a lot, and like what they could do and what they couldn't do is changing all the time, and they've had different bosses, and I think it's really hard, unless you're independently wealthy, to sit up there.
Hey, I'm sorry, but if you're making $25 million a year and you're Gloria Vanderbilt's son and you haven't socked away enough money to stand up to your bosses, that's just sad.
Yeah, I bet he's not making that much money because the things I've read say they all took enormous pay cuts. That said, they're making more money than most people, and you'd like to think they could be brave every single day. Clearly, there's some things going on there that are not making that possible, and it's really unfortunate. We do see, that other people like Rachel Maddow, thank God she's back and is saying what needs to be said. So we know it can be done. We'll see how much longer. We'll see who buys MSNBC. I mean, if George Soros is listening to WCPT, I'd like to say I think the smartest thing a rich Democrat could do is buy MSNBC, buy CNN, buy up the Washington Post, buy every media outlet you can buy, and make it a real news organization. You don't even have to make it, left-leaning. You could just do the freaking news. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be a change of pace.
Yeah. There are a lot of people out there with a lot of money who could be doing stuff like that. I don't know why the right's the only one side that's figured out that owning the megaphone is powerful.
Well, this might be a little bit in the weeds, but audience, there's a tech reporter by the name of Kara Swisher. She was a tech reporter before any of us even knew what the heck tech was or the internet or any of it. I mean, she literally knew Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos when they were nobodies, when they were scrabbling to establish some sort of success. And she's been very public about the fact that she is trying to put together a group of people to buy the Washington Post. And I hope she succeeds. I hope she succeeds.
This, though, he's not going to sell it to her. Are you kidding? Right now? All the money that he's spent and all the knee bending that he's done to be on Trump's good side, if he sells it to somebody who is going to change the tenor of the Washington Post in a way that is even remotely critical of Trump, then all of that work that Jeff Bezos has done to be a doormat is for naught. That's why I don't know, though, that
on the other hand, it gets rid of a problem. He bought the Washington Post in some sort of explosion of I'm going to save democracy. Remember, democracy dies in darkness, and I'm going to put them all this money, and they're going to be an international paper. And, oh, wait a minute. Now, at this moment in time, it's hurting my business interests. I'm hoping that there's still a shred of that Jeff Bezos who wanted to save the universe. And this would solve his problem. He doesn't have to worry about what the Washington Post does or doesn't do anymore if she takes it off his hands.
No, maybe a year from now or something when he's not. He just a couple days ago, Jeff Bezos put Amazon advertising back on Twitter. So he is not selling the Washington Post to Kara Swisher. He just is moving closer and closer to Trump and Musk. Right? He didn't need to put Amazon advertising back on Twitter. They hadn't been there for a long time. They left when Musk bought it. But they announced rather quietly, I'm not sure they actually announced it, but late last week, that they were resuming advertising on Twitter. That's not a guy that is going to get in any kind of position where Donald Trump can be mad at him. I'm just saying. Maybe when it's less of a big deal. I just wouldn't hang on to that, Joan. I would just set it aside and put it over here, and we'll see what happens.
You could end up being exactly right, but I'm telling you, that Kara Swisher, she's scrappy, and I would not count her out of this game.
Maybe she should buy CNN.
Guys, we need to take a break. I'm doing our monthly media segment with Jennifer Schulze and Mark Jacob. We'll be right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
This is our monthly media segment. I'm joined by Jennifer Schulze, who writes the newsletter Indistinct Chatter, and Stop the Press's newsletter writer Mark Jacob is here. We are talking about the media and what is going on. Real quick, we want to have a moment of silence for the reader. Shh, we're having our moment of silence now. When I first got to town, the reader was a big deal. It was how you found your apartment in all their pages of advertising. And the reader is very, very much on life support, and the plug is probably going to be pulled sooner rather than later. Any thoughts on that, Mark Jacob?
Well, I mean, they haven't given up yet, and I think if some rich benefactor wants to save them, they could do that, and I wish they would. I was actually privileged to write the 50th anniversary story for the reader, about its history. And you're right about the classified ads and what a big deal they were at the time. In fact, they were so popular, these the apartment ads and all that thieves used to sneak into the printing plant and grab the free newspaper and steal it, and then go sell it on the street corner for $1 a piece.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And back in those days, I mean, the reader was hefty. It was a tome, as they say. I mean, there was a lot to it. And I understand that it's not so hefty anymore. Jennifer, any thoughts?
No.
Well, I mean, it's part of a trend, right? And, I mean, I think the Chicago Sun-Times is really struggling. I think WBEZ is really struggling. I don't know for sure about the Tribune, where it is at this moment, but it's been through some really, really rough patches. Ratings are down for all of our local news broadcasts on all the various TV stations. It's a tough time for regular journalism, let alone, an alt weekly like the Reader. I was telling my kids what that Reader used to look like. And didn't it come out on Thursday night? And you were desperate to get one because it was a big deal. And you'd go, you knew where they were going to be, and you get them, and they weighed like 10 pounds, and they were like 8 inches thick, and it was something.
And if you were in journalism, you always rushed to read the hot type column there. And
Michael Miner?
And it was. Yes. I mean, that was the best kind of media criticism of Chicago media that you could get, and so it was a big rush. That we sent the copy clerk out to get one, to get a bunch of them for us, every Thursday afternoon. Mm-hmm. And it was, that was before the internet, and before classified ads went to Craigslist, and I mean, it was a different time, but it was a cash cow for a while. I mean, I interviewed all the founders, and they started, they're just clipping together the newspaper on the kitchen table, and in a apartment on the far north side, and they just kind of struck it rich. And they all, I mean, not like super rich, but they managed to make a good living out of it because of the advertising it was such an attractive advertising market, or demographic. It was all the young people who wanted to go to clubs and wanted to go to plays and, and wanted to buy furniture. And it was amazing. And it also, I don't know if people outside of Chicago understand this, but it really set the tone for a lot of alt weeklies all around the country. I mean, there was Boston Phoenix was kind of beat the Chicago Reader by a little bit, but the Reader was maybe more influential overall. And, in L.A. and in many other places, people started alt weeklies based on what had happened in Chicago.
Mark, one of the things that I was talking to Jennifer about this morning is that it seemed to me that the Reader didn't evolve. I mean, the Reader could have been Block Club Chicago. The Reader could have done that. And the Reader just sort of stayed the same with this, I think, this feeling, we're the Reader. People love us for who we are. Why should we change? And it felt like the rest of the media ecosystem kept moving forward, and they were like frozen in time. I don't know if that's something you agree with, Mark, or not.
Oh, totally. In fact, I interviewed, people who were running the Reader at the time about that. I mean, maybe overly simplistic explanation, but an explanation of what happened was the Tribune and the Sun-Times were not covering entertainment very well. And they didn't make their advertising, their classified advertising, very attractive to young people. And so the Reader just stepped in and did all that and really and that's where they really made their bones. But they kept on doing the same thing for, decade after decade, and were very resistant to the internet. I've interviewed them about it, and they kind of admit that, in retrospect, that they just were just slow on the uptake. They weren't the only ones. Obviously, a lot of print media were very resistant and slow to understand what was going on. I was working in daily newspapers then at the Sun-Times and the Trib, and you think back on that. And in 1999, when I left the Sun-Times to go to the Trib, the Sun-Times had one terminal connected to the internet in its entire newsroom.
No. Wow.
Yeah, in 1999. And, the Trib was a little more technologically advanced, and so they had the internet. I mean, they've sometimes caught up, but still, I mean, it just tells you something when that's the case. People had to, wait in line to use the internet at the Sun-Times. And the Trib, the Trib actually bought 10% of AOL, America Online, at one point, and was a real smart investor in the internet and in online news, but they just kind of let that fade away, and there was a lack of commitment, throughout the organization about it, and it was kind of fatal to them. And also when I was at the Trib, the whole news staff. A lot of the news staff was really print oriented, and the internet was just an afterthought. Well, we got to and all the deadlines, all the schedules, everything was oriented toward print, and there was very great resistance to changing any of the mindset to meet the needs of a digital reader. I mean, it was a giant philosophical fight all the time.
Well, go ahead.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the last time that the Reader was at death's door, it was actually on the verge of being sold to the Chicago Tribune. Mm-hmm. And my husband Edwin Eisendrath was part of the group that raised money and saved the Sun-Times, and with it saved the Chicago Reader. He found Tracy Bain to run the Reader and kept it going for another few years and tried to re-energize it. So maybe something like that will happen again. We'll see.
Well, it could. We've now tried to sell CNN, MSNBC, the Reader, I don't know. I would like to know if there are deep-pocketed Democrats who would like to buy Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, because for the right price, I could be your personal broadcaster. By the way, Jen and Mark, there will never be any money for you. Sorry, but, I'm the star. If there is a deep-pocketed investor, contact me directly, please. It feels like we're going to have to rely on philanthropy to keep our democracy going.
Yeah, that's the truth, and that's worked out fairly well in Chicago. I mean, everyone's under distress. I understand that, but there are success stories like Black Club Chicago, and a lot of them, the small startups, they rely on the foundations and this and that, and nonprofit is kind of the new trend in news organizations that are proving to be healthy enough to survive. And but the thing about that, if that works in big cities that have a lot of rich people, it doesn't work very well in like downstate Illinois, where there's a lot of empty ground and there's not that many people and there aren't that many philanthropists. So it's a huge problem, bigger problem outside Chicago than inside Chicago.
Well, we will. It'll be interesting to see how this whole thing evolves, and it'll be interesting to see who finally scoops up MSNBC. And I sure hope they understand that they have the corner on the market and act appropriately. Who knows? Maybe Jim Acosta will show up. Wasn't last Friday supposed to be Andrea Mitchell's last day? I don't know. We'll see. But we will be back to analyze all of it in just a few weeks. Jennifer Schulze, Indistinct Chatter is where you can find her on Substack, also Heartland Signal. Mark Jacobs, Stop the Press's newsletter, stopthepresses.news if you want to subscribe. I will be back here tomorrow at 2 o'clock, whether or not you think that's a good idea. I hope you will join me then. Now we're going to turn things over to Patty Vasquez, who is going to be talking again about Wisconsin politics. Choose Views kicks off tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. He's going to have his regular contributor, Kurt Mullett, on with him. And I will be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Tomorrow we're going to be talking to some interesting people, some that you know and some that you don't. Tiffany Muller from End Citizens United will be joining me, along with one of my favorites, Professor Marjorie Hershey, as we talk political rhetoric. Have a great evening, my friends. I will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Good night.